Hello, everybody, and welcome to Kerava Library. Today, our guest author will be Sophie Labelle, so welcome.
Good job. Hei kaikki. Tervetuloa Keravan kirjastoon. Yes, that's the extent of my Finnish. Yeah, thank you for coming, and thank you for the invitation to your space. It's my first time speaking in Kerava. Not my first time in Kerava, though. Okay, my husband and I. My husband is Finnish. That's why the Finnish, right? That's why I'm here. Yeah, we almost moved here. We visited like dozens of houses in Kerava. We almost ended up living in Kerava. We ended up choosing North Karelia, okay? Mostly just because it's a lot cheaper over there. and so tonight I'm gonna be speaking for some time, and then after that I'm gonna be answering questions before devolving into some book signing. That's what's happening here. Book signing. There's poster signing too, or like I can sign anything. I don't know. I see there's like a IKEA shark. I can sign sharks as well. So this is the only European stop on this current North American tour. Yes, I was on the way to the airport from North Karelia, as you understood. Tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm flying to Canada for a series of talks in North America. So yeah, I'm very excited to be in Kerava. I was just saying at the beginning, if you were listening, what we were chatting about, how usually when I'm invited to speak in Finland, it's always in the big center, in the big cities. So I spoke several times in Helsinki, but never in outside of Helsinki. In Uusimaa, I spoke in Turku, in Tampere, in Oulu, but yeah, first time in Kerava. So my name is Sophie. Hi. Uh, I was just like chatting about current events. Yeah, this is a tour. I'm doing a speaking tour. Okay, this is like this 200th event on this tour. It started in September, and since then I visited about 15 countries. I've been speaking in different cities every day since September. I only took a few days off here and there for Christmas and stuff like that. But yet, this tour has been so long, mostly because no, we're locked. Are we locked? Um, where's the washroom, by the way, in case people. It's okay. No, not for me, not for me. Just in case some people. Um, I was under the impression that the door would remain open. Oh, it's just very heavy. Oh, okay. um, oh, yeah, by the way, welcome to people watching online, by the way. Um, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, this is my last tour. It started in September. I told people on the internet this is my last tour. So if you want to invite me to your city, now's the chance because I'm not ever doing that again. No, not just to be dramatic. My husband and I, we're having a child. It's just another cat.
Kello 18.30 alkaa Pentin kulman salissa Impron avoimet harjoitukset.
Ai mitkä harjoitukset? Ei kiinnosta.
No kuule, ne on ihan sellaiset mukavat harjoitukset, mitä voi tulla katsomaan tai sitten itse osallistua.
En halua. Häiritsette minun lukurauhaa. Pistäkää nuo kuulutukset kiinni, niin saa rauhassa olla.
No mutta, jos haluatte tulla, niin 18.30 Pentin kulman sali, kiitos.
Beautiful, beautiful. Nah, I was kidding. The child is gonna be a human child. Okay, and not a cat, not a cat. And so it's just gonna be very hard for me to leave Finland for a very long time, which means I'll still be able to come to Kerava. Okay, if you were worried, oh my God, she's finally in Kerava and now she's gone forever. No, no, you're stuck with me. I'm sorry. I've been learning Finnish. Okay, I've been learning Finnish. But yeah, that's that. It's been happening. It's been happening. The learning. But yeah, give me a few more years, please. It's my fifth language. So yeah, my first language is French. That's this accent you hear. Okay, I'm French Canadian from the eastern part of Canada, and so yeah, I started learning English when I was 12. So everything is possible, you know. I know a lot of Finns are self-conscious about their English skills. Well, I'm the living proof that everything is possible. I've been learning English mostly by listening to Broadway musicals that I knew in French. And then, you know, I just understood the lyrics because I knew the lyrics in French and in English. But yeah, I was that kind of kid. Any musical fans here? No? Broadway musicals? Anyone? Okay. Yes. All right. Well, I'm gonna be speaking a lot about musicals a bit more because I have nothing better to talk about apparently. No, just kidding, just kidding. I'm a cartoonist. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. This is just my introduction, okay? I'm a cartoonist. I've been drawing Assignment Comics on social media since 2014. Serious Trans Vibes on Webtoon. Anyone following from Webtoon here? Yes, yes, Webtoon. That's where I'm gonna go once all social media crash and burn. Okay, I'm already planning like deleting Twitter. That's gonna be so good. Uh, and I'd say I've been drawing these comics for about a decade now. At first, it was mostly just to entertain my trans friends at school. Not that I didn't have any straight friends. I didn't. Not because I'm a heterophobe. Okay, let's make that clear. I am not a heterophobe. Oh, you are. Okay. I mean, this is a safe space. Okay. But yeah, no, I'm not a heterophobe. In fact, both of my parents are straight people. Yes, yes, I know, shocking. They didn't manage to, you know, brainwash me into heterosexuality, but no, but it's been always so inspiring for me as a child to see two straight people, you know, just living their best lives and just being straight in the open like that, and very active in the straight community. Sorry. But yeah, I started drawing these comics just for my friends at school to create something that would be empowering for them. And that was in 2014. Okay, were you all born 2014? Okay. All right, all right. No, usually in most of the events on this store, there has been like very small children. Okay. But yeah, in 2014, if you remember, you might not remember, but the only representation that we had was not the best kind. Usually, you know, it was to make jokes about trans people, or just to, you know, the characters that were trans on TV or in books were caricatures, were meant to be the butt of the joke, and so watching that as a kid felt very objectifying. It was just always always really weird in the sense that it always felt like some kind of wildlife documentary on yourself. Like every time you see a trans person on TV, it just sounds like, here comes a trans person in their natural environment. It's like a trans person in the Finnish forest, See how they gather hormones for their winter. And so that's really the context in which I started making my comics. I didn't want to create something that was necessarily educational about trans people, because I wanted the target audience of my comics to be queer and trans people themselves. And yeah, that's very rare, because every time there's content being made about trans people, it's always for the benefit of an audience that isn't trans. And I started making these comics, while I was still at school. I was studying something completely unrelated to comics. I have a diploma in sewing. Yeah, no, I grew up. My dream as a child was to become a costume designer on Broadway, like for plays and musicals and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I grew up. I have two brothers, very macho, masculine brothers. Okay, and I'm in the middle. Okay, so all the adults in my life growing up, they were like, okay, well, this one is a little, Anyway, and so yeah, I started making these comics, and a few weeks after I started, something magical happened. Haters happened. And the transphobes, they really hated my comics, which is great. You don't want transphobes to like what you do, right? So so that really motivated me to keep drawing comics. They got obsessed with my comics, especially TERFs. Have you heard of TERFs? TERFs, unfortunately. Do we have TERFs in Finland? See, that's the great part about being a foreigner in Finland and not understanding a lot of the language. I still, just flip through the news and I only get the gist of it. And so I don't have to suffer when there's bad news. And no, it's great. It's great. Every time, my trans Finnish friends are sharing articles about the transphobia in Finland, I'm like, no. We live in the middle of the forest. Okay, literally. I told you that we thought Kerava was too expensive. Well, the house we did find that wasn't expensive was, we have moose problems, okay? And so from my point of view, the only Finns that I meet are at these events like that. So in my opinion, Finland is amazing. 50% of the population has colored hair. Anyway, so yeah, my haters. TERFs. I was talking about TERFs. So TERFs, it stands for no. Am I allowed to swear here? Where's Demi? Okay. It's in English. Doesn't count. So yeah, it stands for trans exclusionary radical fuckers. They're the people who believe that trans women are tools of the patriarchy to invade women-only spaces. They usually say that like it's a full-time thing, but for most of us, it's just a hobby. No, You know, after a long day at work, grooming the children, you know, I just love to go to the mall and just, wait in line for the women's restroom. It's great. But I like making fun of turfs because I don't know if you've ever encountered one in the wild. No, they all sound like cartoon villains. For real, like every time you interact with one, they start they break out in monologues. You know, they're like um, it just feels like every time I interact with one, it ends with them like yelling, "Well, I'll get you next time, Sophie Labelle," and they wave their capes and run away. Um, no, I like making fun of them, but so so yeah, they were a great uh, they were a big inspiration for me to keep drawing comics. Eventually, I decided to quit school to draw comics, which was my mom's dream. That yes, yes, that I quit school to draw comics. No, actually, she I feel sometimes she doesn't exactly understand what I do as a living. She's just like, "Oh, you're so lucky to have such great time on vacation in Finland," and I'm like, "Mom, this is my work." But even though she still struggles with my cartoonist pronouns. You might not you might relate with the struggling with pronoun part as Finns. Okay. One of the main reason we decided to stay in Finland is because people are just so confused with pronouns here. I love it. I love it. It's just chaos. My husband, when we speak English, sometimes he's talking about somebody, and then he's just gonna list all the pronouns just in case, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But yeah, she struggles with my cartoonist pronouns. Even though very early on when I was a kid, I started saying that I would grow up to have a cartoonist body. Yeah, my parents, as a child, they were just like, "Oh, that's cute. That's not even a real job." They're very binary in their opinion of what's a real job. But yeah, I started drawing comics when I was 7. At first, it was just to as a way for me to annoy my older brother. Um, him and his best friend, they started making comics about their 5th grade teachers, and they called it the Comic Club. Can I get some echo? The Comic Club. No. I like having a mic. I should just like have a mic with me at all times, walking around. But yeah, they were drawing comics about their 5th grade teachers, and well, I really wanted to be part of that comic club, so I started drawing comics about my older brother's 5th grade teachers, which I never met. Um, but they got very popular in our hometown. About that, it feels like Kerava sometimes, okay? But in North America, imagine Kerava in North America, okay? Super weird. All the shops, they're in a mall, okay? Imagine a mall instead. A lot more space for cars. Um, and my parents, they were very happy about this new development, because I wanted to become a costume designer on Broadway before that. And when I got into comics, they were so relieved, okay, because in the 90s, remember the 90s? Last century. They yeah, comics were a very masculine thing. They were like masculine coded. It was a hobby meant for boys. And so when I got into comics, my parents were like, "Yes, finally, telling all the adults, oh yes, we think he's still gonna turn out very gay, but at least he's into comics now. Oh, I was, whoo, good job. Anyway, so they started buying me all the comics I wanted. Okay, uh, yeah, my brothers they wanted comics as well, and my parents were like, "Do you really need them?" They were very jealous, and so yeah, I kept drawing comics. It was a great way for me at school to deal with the bullying. I was getting bullied quite a lot. I was still getting bullied after I started making comics, but at least, I started having people just being like, he's drawing comics. And the bullies were like, sorry, can I see them? And I was like, also, that's how I met the person who is still my best friend today. We were just, just staying in our corner of the schoolyard, making comics and drawing. That's the ancestor of, LGBT clubs at libraries, Uh, and and yeah, she's the one who introduced me to DeviantArt. Anyone? DeviantArt? You've heard of it, yes. That's where people went in the early 2000s to post yaoi fan arts. Somebody's feeling attacked here. If you don't know what yaoi fan arts are, good for you. Good for you. Don't Google it. Don't Google it, especially not on the library Wi-Fi. Uh, but yeah, that's why I was there, and that's where I met my first trans friend, and that was super important for me. I told you, I'm from a smaller town, and yeah, people, weren't out over there. I had no idea who trans people were until that friend told me. That friend, she was like, "Hey," we had just been like, talking for a few weeks, and she's like, "I get this vibe from you," and she was just like, "Have you considered you might be trans?" And I was just like, "Me? What is it? Is it why are you saying that? Is it because of the dress?" And she was just like, "Yeah, yeah." Also, the fact that you have already picked your girl name. Who does that? And I was just like, everybody does that. And she was like, no. So yeah, I came out the next day um, on LiveJournal. Do you remember live? You don't remember LiveJournal over there, but that's where people went when they were too emo for MySpace. Uh, and anyway, after that, it became really hard for me to keep drawing the adventures of my older brother's fifth grade teachers. Yes, that was still happening. We have a whole wall of boxes full of comics about my older brother's fifth grade teachers. I never met them. But yeah, that's when I fully realized how badly I needed representation, and so I just started working on stories that featured trans and gender non-conforming characters, and I have to say that I was I was very out. I mean, I said that I came out, but when I came out to my parents, my dad was just so happy. He was just like, "Yeah, you want to bet against my mom?" And yeah, if I was in the closet, if I was ever in the closet, it was like sewn outdoors. Um, but yeah, I was still the youngest out student at my school. I got a boyfriend when I was 14. We were the talk of the town. That's like 2002. Okay, our first date was to go see the first Harry Potter movie. Yikes. Yikes. But yeah, we ended up on the newspapers. Just yeah, no. It was a big deal, and really, started my activist career. There was a teacher at my high school who asked me to start, an LGBT club, and so I just kept doing activism through school, through college, through university, and yeah, started. I was just feeling empowered by meeting other trans and queer kids, and then I started seeing all of these friends just disappearing, and then not being kidnapped. They were just basically moving into the woods. Okay, everybody ends up. No, but just people getting burnt out from activism, people just getting so tired of constantly re-explaining all the same thing. Explaining constantly, their existence, having to educate everybody around them all the time, and so when I started my comics, yes, I'm still talking about comics. This is a story about comics, okay. When I started Assignment Comics in 2014, I really wanted it to serve as some type of tools for people that they could use, instead of getting into social media fights about, whenever their transphobic uncle posted some problematic stuff on Facebook, they could just, passive aggressively share a comic instead. I just really want to give queer and trans people a break. And so yeah, I started making comics that were basically meant to let people breathe, and that's still kind of what I do today. Although more like as the years pass, the less bullshit I'm able to take, and yeah, what I really want in life right now is to create content that brings empowerment, yes, but also joy to people, making, content that people can relate and find entertaining. Because right now, it's been quite the year. Like we're talking about transphobia in the media earlier, but Finland has had some wins in terms of trans rights and queer rights recently, while the rest of the world is suddenly completely going backwards. So I don't know, maybe it's just because everything arrives in Finland like 5 years later. But so maybe we should get prepared right now for this wave. Like in 5 years, they're gonna start they're gonna start complaining about drag queens in 5 years. Everybody's gonna be like, "Where were you?" But but yeah, that's what I've been doing for the past decade, and it has devolved into several other media. I've been drawing the comics since 2014, yes, but I've also made a series of novels. I have a few novels out in English. That it's thanks to my haters, really, that my novels exist. No, for real. They doxed me in 2017. They published my address online. They wanted to crash one of my book launch for another of my comics. This one, I was launching this comic in Canada, and they sent death threats to participants, to organizers, and it's called Dating Tips for Trans and Queer Weirdos. Not a guide. It's not a guide, okay? If you're like, oh, maybe I need that. No, you don't. Do not follow any dating advice from me. I ended up in Finland. But so I was launching this book, which is about one of my characters who want to ask their crush on a date, and yeah, I ended up the event got cancelled, and ended up getting doxxed, which means my personal information ended up on a far right forum, and we had to move and all sorts of fun stuff like that. That's why I'm hiding in the woods now. But no, just kidding, just kidding. But yeah, the this thing ended up in most national newspapers in Canada. People were talking about it. I was on TV, and someone that I had met when I was a teenager, we were at a friend's birthday party, and she was a common friend of both of us, and yeah, she was studying to become a publisher. And so she messaged me 10 years later after I got doxxed, and she was like, "You probably don't remember me because we were quite passed out. Yeah, we drink like Finns in French Canada. And But yeah, I'm a publisher now, and I remembered when we were chatting in that bar, you told me that you were working on a novel, and I was just like, "Oh, yeah, I was working on not exactly a novel. It's called a fan fiction." Yeah, and she was like, I became a publisher, and we're interested in publishing one of your stories if you're still writing. I was like, well, I did finish that fan fiction, okay, and then I printed it, and then I burnt it. Uh, but yeah, maybe I can write another book for you, and so that's how I ended up writing this novel that I have here. It's called Ciel. Can you clap? Yes, thank you, thank you. Okay. I know Finns don't like to get ordered around. Except by NATO, apparently. I don't know. I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay. And when I was writing that novel, I really wanted to create a story that would be about trans and queer characters without the plot of the story revolving around their transness or their queerness. Because, most of the time when we get a story about a trans character, it's because the story is about their transition, is about them being trans, and so that's the reason most of my characters, we don't see them transitioning. They're just trans. They're just there, and the goal was to create a story that wouldn't be about the character's transness, but not only that, but also I wanted something that wasn't overly dramatic. Usually, the positive representation we do get often ends in blood. It's always very tragic. It's always stories of murder and disastrous coming out where people they lose loved ones and stuff like that. So yeah, as a kid, I was really into the Babysitters Club. Did that get translated in Finnish? Yes. What is it in Finnish? Oh my God. Okay, so my first language is French, okay? And we have this little quirk about us that we cannot stand English, okay? No, there's actual laws, especially in French Canada, because, we're kind of surrounded by 330 million English-speaking people. Yeah, that's a lot of people. And so everything must be in French if it's targeted at a French-speaking market. So we translated that, the Babysitters Club anyway. Babysitters Club. But yeah, if you know the Babysitters Club, you will know that not much happens in it. I love that. As a kid, I was so into the Babysitters Club because nothing ever happened. Okay, every time I saw trans and gender non-conforming characters on TV that felt like me, it was always so tragic. The future was just so bleak for me. But in youth literature, I really enjoyed how, especially in the Babysitters Club, just nothing happened. And so yeah, I wanted that for my novels. Okay, I know it's a terrible selling point. Read my story. Nothing happens. But yeah, it's a lot of fun though. And as a proof of that, the first big critique that came out about my novel when it came out, it was in the newspaper. The journalist who was doing the critique of the novel was like, "Oh, it's a fun story, a lot of humor. Sophie Labelle, very very funny girl." But yeah, not much happens in that in that story, and I was just like, yes. But I did find it very unrealistic. That's the journalist talking. She was like, it was very unrealistic how so many of these characters were trans. She was just like, how do they know each other? She was just like, what are the odds that there might be more than one trans character in a book? And I just remembered I was reading that, and I was just thinking to myself, I haven't talked to a cis person in 3 weeks. She also thought it was very unrealistic how none of these kids' parents had any issue with them being trans. She was expecting lots of drama. She was expecting like a bloodshed, Nope. No, it's just the Babysitters Club with trans characters. But another thing that was a lot of fun to create was to get to make several children's books. I was asked by publishers to create stories aimed at younger children. I don't have any today, but I did bring my coloring book. I brought the one in Finnish. This is a Finnish version, translated by my husband. And what was fun about it was that I invited a dozen of guest artists to participate to it. So I wrote the whole thing, and artists that wanted to participate could pick a page to illustrate, and yeah, it's artists from all over the place. There's a dozen of artists from all around the world, but 3 Finnish artists. And yeah, each page explores a different area, like talks about gender, about body diversity, consent, feminist stuff. So here it says, tänään Boris puki kouluun yllen lempimekkonsa. Boriksen luokkakaverit nauroivat. I'm sorry, speaking Finnish in front of an audience. It's too much stress. I cannot say it right. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun to make. Can you clap for the coloring book? Yes. Thank you. Okay, it's good. You'll be able to flip through it later and read it correctly. I promise. Yeah, do you have any questions for me? Well, I try to drink some water. Think of a question. Can be about anything. Can be about making art. Can be about touring the world. It can be about being harassed by hate groups in England, as I was a few months ago. There was a hate group over there, the British government. That yeah, no, they denounced my tour in the media because it was a threat to children. And an actual MP, member of parliament, went in the newspaper to be like, yeah, she's coming here with our taxpayers' dollars. Anyway, it's not even dollars over there. Yes? Oh yeah, we have a mic. That's right. Sorry, I forgot to mention.
Kuinka kovalla se on?
You have no choice.
What usually happens on your comics?
Not much. Well, it's a good question. Most of the time when I end up speaking in front of audiences, it's usually people who have already read my work. So I don't get to define it a lot, but it's very relevant. I should have started with that, you know. But I mostly do work for social media, which means that, you know, even though there are longer story arcs where, you know, like events happen and characters have actual adventures, usually one page is one situation that, you know, resolves in itself. Think of newspaper comics, maybe. But about, you know, queer and trans issues, feminist issues, or social justice at large. Sometimes I talk about environment or things like that, and I react to the news a lot because, you know, the nature of my work being on social media means that people who see them, you know, it's just part of their daily routine. So they do enjoy to be able to use my comics as reactions to what's happening in the world, and so yeah, maybe I feel I use my comics a lot to digest what I'm thinking about things myself. Sometimes when I start writing a comic, you know, I don't know exactly what it's gonna say, or I don't have a clear idea of what the comic is about, and I just, you know, write it. Usually when I write new comic pages, there's like a dozen of version of that same page where I'm just, you know, changing the words, tweaking things and moving things around. And then at some point, you know, I find what I'm actually gonna say about something, and that's the comic, basically. Something that makes a lot of people upset about my comic is that I forgot to mention that my characters are teenagers. They are a bunch of, you know, sarcastic queer and trans teenagers, and yeah, I get a lot of hate for that. The fact that, you know, my comics provide examples of queer and trans lives that aren't typically shown in media. And yeah, I get a lot of hate for that. But also allows me to create content that is more like playful. It's usually, you know, there's always like a humor aspect to it. I try to create something that is fun, as I mentioned. So I guess that's mostly what I'm doing. I do love to take breaks from social media. Social media is a plague. No, for real. For real, my idea of retirement is just to be offline. Okay, when I retire from comics, I'm still gonna be making comics because that's what I do. But yeah, I just dream about being offline, just not engaging with all the drama on social media. It just sounds lovely. but yeah, my work is on social media. The fact that I can make a living from comics is because of social media and Webtoon. I mentioned Webtoon at the beginning. If you don't know Webtoon, it's an app and a website where you can read comics. And unlike social media, they actually pay creators to post their art there. So it's a bit like YouTube, but for cartoonists. And yeah, unlike Webtoon, social media, you're just basically getting paid from like how much you engage with the audience, and that means that as a creator, if I spend too long without posting on social media, I'll get deplatformed and my reach is gonna go down and stuff like that. It's just so stressful. 10 years. It's been 10 years where every day I have to like go on these apps and go on these social media, and it's so stressful. I don't think it's healthy for anyone to do it for that long. So eventually, I'm gonna, retire from social media. Very much looking forward to that. Okay. But yeah, that's basically what I do. That's basically what my comics are like. There's a bunch of them here that you can flip through, as I mentioned. Oh yeah, the place where I was going with that part about retiring from social media. I sometimes take like week-long breaks from posting new comics on social media that are just quick and short. I like to create longer stories in comic forms and not post them online, but only like making books out of them. I don't have any copies of my anthology. There's an anthology that exists. Do you have it at the library? The Best of Assigned Mail? No? Oh, okay. Oh, yes. We talked about that. You can get it at the library. My anthology. But since I started my comics, I was very involved in the DIY scene, in zine making. Are you familiar with zines? Zines are books that you print yourself, basically. And so yeah, I have a bunch of them here. And sometimes, I just like to spend a few weeks just working on a longer stories that isn't meant for social media. This one is called Help, Everything in My Life is Turning Gay. Spooky. And so yeah, that's also another thing that I do. I like to use that opportunity to like deepen the characters' stories and relationships between each other, because on social media with like one page for like a joke or something like that, it's very, it needs to remain on the surface very much. Do you have more questions for me, Kerava? Run, Demi. Oh, I could have just like passed yours. Sorry, I thought it was funnier to just tell you to run.
Out of your own art, which piece is your favorite?
Thank you for that. You can, by the way, you can also ask your questions in Finnish, and we will translate. And by we, I mean not me. I'm just kidding. Sometimes I watch a children's show, okay, and I'm like, oh, I got a word there. I understood that. No. What's the best? Well, I wouldn't say it's probably not like a drawing that I would have made, because I always keep trying to outdo myself. Like every art that I make, I'm like, oh, this is the best one yet, because I keep growing as an artist. So if I told you like this drawing is my best one yet, it changes every week basically. Well, the book I made that I'm the proudest of would be The Best of Assigned Mail, which I mentioned earlier. which has been published in the UK 2 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic. Uh, we had been working on it for 2 years, and yeah, we had planned a whole tour for the launch of it, and then the pandemic happened, and then the book got launched, and that was very sad. Um, but yeah, I think it is. If you would see it, it's like a 400-page brick. Okay, it's very heavy, very hefty. Um, it is. It is the trans Bible to me of my work, but because I mean I don't speak for the trans people. Okay, I'm too sarcastic for that. No, for real, a lot of people. Um, I was like that as a teenager as well. Okay, a lot of people, when they realize how bad queer and trans people have it, their first reaction is to apologize for existing, basically, and to get into respectability politics, which means basically to tell the rest of society that you're unlike all these people. I'm one of the good ones, right? I'm not gonna get upset, if you mistreat me. I'm just gonna be like, oh, by the way, could you, not impede on my rights? I'm caricaturing, but that's how I was as a teenager, just being like, oh, these radical trans people are making other trans people look bad, and things like that. And just my comics, just the tone that I use, just the fact that I use it to create something empowering, and that is meant to be entertaining for trans people. That's already a lot for many trans people who would rather be invisible in society. And deep inside of me, I get that, because it's not always fun to be part of that minority. And say I wouldn't talk like. I wouldn't call my book the Trans Bible, like because of that. I would though call it like my latest book. I would call it the Trans Agenda. Yeah, subtitle: Official Propaganda for the Radical and Powerful Trans Lobby. um, because I get to do that because it's sarcastic and sassy, and also playing on the fears of transphobes. But yeah, I think it's important to make sure that every parts of our communities are heard. And that's also the reason why I often, try to incorporate artists from diverse backgrounds in my projects. I talked about my coloring book, but yeah, also often include intersex and transmasculine writers that I invite to participate in collaborations and stuff like that. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question. I kind of went like a bit sideways, but but yeah, I'm very proud of that best of, and yeah, it's always the last thing that I've made. I'm 500 words away from finishing my 5th novel. Yes, I know. I've been, like, every single free time that I had in the past few months, I've been working on that novel as I was traveling between places on that tour. It's been really hard. I actually thought that I would be finishing it this afternoon on the train from Kuopio, but didn't happen. I still have a few paragraphs left, but maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be the end. So once I'm done with that book, that's going to be my favorite thing that I've made. So. You have more questions, Kerava? Can I call you Kerava? Maybe I'll just pass it to you.
Thank you very much. I am very interested. Are you self-learned author, or have you had any teacher or reader or someone who can have given some feedback to you?
The only background that I have is in fashion design. All of the clothes in my comics are technically correct. That's what I studied. And I did work a long time in, not in the fashion industry. I was making costumes mostly for theater and things like that. I'm not, like, as a retirement project, maybe it's still one of my loves in life. But other than that, I've just been reading a lot of comics, and it's a language that really speaks to me, mostly because of ADHD. Yes. ADHD makes it that, my brain is constantly seeking sensations, right? And comics provide that to me, provides food for so many of my senses, because we see there are words, there are movements, images, and it's always very dynamic inside comic strips, and so yeah, having ADHD makes it that I'm always seeking that these sensations, and so growing up, the language of comics has always touched me in that sense. It's also why I'm so into musicals, I think, because musicals, they're like theater, but with dancing and music and colors and costumes and the lights and stuff. So I think that musicals are to theater what comics are to literature, and so yeah, I just like how vibrant that is. And so so growing up, I've been consuming a lot of comics, and I think I learned a lot on about how to do my work from, I'd say, a few authors. First and foremost, probably with Bill Watterson for Calvin and Hobbes, but also Alison Bechdel from who was drawing Dykes to Watch Out For in the 80s, which is very much has a lot of the vibe that I try to put in my comics, which is to show our communities for the sake of entertaining this own community. She was writing Dykes to Watch Out For with the intent of creating something her lesbian community could relate to, as a mirror that she would, show to that community. And that's what I try to do with my comics. So that's very inspiring. Also, one of her graphic novels, Fun Home, got turned into a musical, and that's like a career achievement that I aspire to. So I would say that these two are probably my main spiritual teachers. Probably, I read a lot of newspaper comics, obviously, as a kid. Snoopy, Garfield, things like that. Until I got a very heavy manga phase. Yes, I had a manga phase. I'm still recovering. I'm a recovering otaku. Yeah, I got really into mangas when I was 11. Back then it was Sailor Moon, and that's right when Fruit Baskets came out in French, Ranma. we didn't have the same mangas as in Finland because my husband was really into mangas as well, and so he showed me like his entire collection, and they're not the same. It's really weird. You have this big fixation on wolves here, um, but yeah, I got into mangas because you know, to our Westerner eyes, manga art, Japanese art, often feels very androgynous. Um, but like to their eyes, it's not. But to us, it just gives us this space to, you know, explore gender in a way that wasn't available in Western uh, comics. Although I was really into Donald Duck comics as well, which is something we share in common with between French-speaking countries and Finland. It's a big thing apparently. Donald Duck comics and so yeah, you know, animals, Japanese art that felt androgynous. I was escaping basically the gendered prison that I was forced into, and comics really provided me with that in ways that TV wouldn't, or other media wouldn't. So yeah, that's what drove me into comics. That's what you know. That's where I felt inspired to create my own comics. Uh, but never took formal classes. Unlike my older brother, my older brother was the one my parents were like, "Oh, you're gonna be an artist." Uh, yeah, they paid for all these art classes for my older brother. He's a chemist now. um, but yeah, I would just, you know, constantly watch what he was doing in class and copying it, and like trying to learn what the techniques he was learning on the side. And you know, I mentioned that best friend I had through school. She ended up studying in graphic design. So you know, several times a week, I would just go to her place, and she would show me what she had learned in class while I was, you know, studying history and sewing and all these degrees that I have that are completely useless. Useless to me in my work right now. I mean, they're not actually useless. Of course, I wouldn't have studied them otherwise. Um, but yeah, that's how I learned my trade. I also a big part of my work is to go places and speak, which is very odd for a cartoonist. We're usually a very introverted bunch, which might explain why there's so many cartoonists in Finland. Queer cartoonists, and are a big part of Finnish history, which is something, you know, I fell in love with Finland as soon as I set foot here, because, you know, at the airport there were like, you know, uh, Tove Jansson and Tom of Finland. And I was like, okay, that's the place for me. Um, but what was I? Where was I going with that? Introvert. I was talking about introverted. Oh yeah, speaking in front of audiences. Before becoming a cartoonist full time, I had been doing a lot of work on the stage as costume designer, of course. But I was also doing a lot of storytelling. I was doing shows where they're really big in French Canada because our one big part of our culture is to tell traditional stories in front of an audience. That's just a thing we do. I don't see. I see it sometimes here in Finland, but it's not as central to the culture, I feel like. But yeah, that's just something I would do. And so I learned how to speak to an audience from storytellers like that. So yeah. Do you have more questions? Okay, it's coming from behind.
Hi, this is a boring question, but how did you meet your husband?
Is that a boring question? No, when you do this work that I do, there really aren't any bad questions or boring questions because I have good anecdotes for each of them. So actually, I already started talking about this tour that I did in Finland the first time I came here. And yeah, he was part of the organization team in Turku. And in Turku, and yeah, he happened to be single back then. When I started making comics, full time in 2014, I mentioned that I quit school to draw comics. I also quit my job to draw comics. Okay. And then I quit my boyfriend at the time to draw to draw comics. No, but that I also started doing tours. I started getting invited to speak at events. About in 2015, a year in, I was getting invited in other countries to speak about my work, and I was single and very happy, right? And so yeah, for a very long time I had boyfriends in various countries, and I was like, okay, I guess it's happening in Finland as well, because in Turku, this young man that I met, we decided, us with the organization, we went for sushis, and then after that I took the rest of the sushis to my hotel room, and we went out to that other event that was happening in Turku. Lots of stuff happening in Turku. Not assuming that Kerava doesn't have a lot of stuff happening, but at the end of the evening, we were both like, "Oh my God, we're hungry. What's left? What is there to eat in Turku at midnight?" Not much, actually. And I was like, "Well, I got sushis in my hotel room." And he was like, "Well, I do love sushis." So yeah, we went to eat sushis in my hotel room. So we live together now. No, but we had a lot of fun for a few days, and then I was like, okay, well, it's time for me to go on my tour to the distant land of Uusimaa. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll see you there," because it was for the Helsinki Comic Festival, and he was tabling for his organization. I was like, "Oh, okay. Where are you gonna be sleeping?" And he's like, "On my sister's couch." And I was like, "Do you want something more comfortable?" That's how we got married. No, but after that, he followed me on tour in Sweden. I was continuing my tour, and he happened to be an artist as well, so he had a lot of free time, apparently. And so we traveled together, and then after that, I visited for Christmas, and quickly saw all of his friends and family naked in the sauna. as a North American, this was a shock. But then I was like, okay, I guess I have to stay now. Imagine how awkward otherwise, you know. Anyway, eventually, I overstayed the duration of my visa, so we had to get married. It's a terrible way to put it. We were planning to get married for other reasons than my visa. But yeah, it kind of just happened, I guess. I hope you're satisfied and entertained. Yeah, we have time for 2 more questions. Oh, 2 hands, perfect. No. Yeah, no, it was funny you had 2 hands up.
Do you like only men?
Only Men, is that like a website like OnlyFans or? No, I actually like people of several genders. I haven't found a gender that I don't find attractive. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, I've been with people of different genders throughout my life. Yeah, my longest relationships though have been with boys. So, and I mean, as a kid growing up, it was a big deal because people would perceive me as an effeminate boy, and so the fact that I was also attracted to boys meant that it had repercussions on how I would interact with people in society, I guess. But I do identify as bisexual, and just because I've been identifying as bisexual since I was a teenager. Before pansexual was a thing, and I don't have strong reasons why one instead of the other. I just found that community in bisexual circles, and just haven't really felt the need to change it, I guess. Do you have more questions?
Yeah, I could ask one. Yeah.
You're allowed.
What kind of characters do you draw? Like, what are their characteristics? Like, what do they like? What do they don't like? What do they do?
Well, as someone who grew up with very little representation, it was really hard for me to find representation in the media I was interested in. It's always been important for me to show characters with characteristics that I found lacking in the stories I would hear about. And it's still, one of the main motivation for me to create art is to create art that I feel like I would have needed growing up, and so yeah, I tried to apply that to different groups in society. If me as a white person felt underrepresented, I can't even imagine what it's like if I wasn't white. And so yeah, I usually try to create characters that are as diverse as I can. I don't think I will see there won't be a time in my life where I'm gonna be okay. I think there's enough representation out there. I'm gonna write characters that are just all the dominant group in societies, and No, I don't think that's gonna happen. There's just gonna constantly going to be like something else that will need to be propped up. I mentioned that my characters are trans, of course, queer. They're also, disabled, and they are people of color, people of underrepresented religions, and people that are neurodivergent, neurodiverse. Having ADHD myself, if you could tell with this talk, okay. If I speak in front of an audience and I don't mention neurodiversity, people are gonna be like, at the end, do you have ADHD? I'm like, maybe. Why are you asking? So yeah, my characters, are autistic, neurodiverse, and so yeah, that's something that's always on my mind. This need to create more diverse representation out there. Yeah. Does that answer the question? I sure hope so. And people ask me also about my style, because this was like a broad question, I think, and I went like straight for something very specific. But when I design characters, people ask me, how did you end up having a style? Because it really came by itself. To be honest, I mentioned French-speaking countries' comics. Mostly like French-speaking Europe has produced a lot of comics, has a very strong comic tradition. And that's what we get in French Canada. That's very important to understand, because we don't get the same comic culture as the rest of North America. People, they hear that I'm from Canada, that I'm a cartoonist, and they're like, oh yeah, Marvel, DC, The Simpsons, Not at all, because they don't get translated, these comics, they don't get translated into French until they make anthologies or collections with them. And so, here you have all these stalls in the kiosk with Donald Duck comics and stuff like that. We had that, but all the comics came from France, from Belgium, because they wouldn't get translated otherwise. And so so yeah, I grew up with that a lot. My style owes a lot to these French European comics. Think of Asterix, not Tintin. I didn't like Tintin. I thought it was boring. I didn't like it. Too wordy for my ADHD. But other, French European comics, and I do think my style is a mix of French European, very caricatural style with like big nose and big ears, big eyes, and manga art, which is more, which is less defined, more subtle, lots of space left for interpretation, and closer to reality sometimes. Lots of details in the hair of the character, like that. So yeah, that's how I got my style, I guess. And also from making these comics for 10 years, you kind of lean into what you're doing when you spend so much time making comics. One thing I learned while making comics, because I mentioned these comics I was drawing with my older brother, the ones about his 5th grade teachers, right? Well, between that and Assignment Comics in 2014, there was almost a decade gap during which I was still drawing comics, but I was just constantly in some cycle of starting to work on like some project and wanting to create the best story ever. I would design all the characters, like build a world around them, and write 200 pages of a story and everything, and just suddenly just abandoning it and be like, okay, I'm done. It is ADHD, but it was just really hard for me to cut down a project into size, a size that I could manage, because I was constantly wanting to create something that was big and important. I wanted my comics to have some weight in my creative process, and so yeah, the fact that I was only making these comics as a joke for like I was just making turning jokes that were going around in my own community into comics and sharing them on the internet for my friends to have fun with them, after 10 years, I have drawn 1,600 pages of these comics. Yes, that's a lot. And I don't think, if I would have decided, if I was working on that project, if I was writing 1,600 pages all in one shot before showing it to anyone, I would have stopped a long time ago. So yeah, the fact that I've just been doing one page at a time, and just constantly be only thinking about what's going to be the next page about, instead of just seeing the whole the spawning of this entire thing, has been really useful for me, especially as an artist with ADHD. Just writing a novel feels incredible to me, like the fact that I can do that. But it's from lessons that I learned through comics that I've been able to do it. Because since it was working for me to separate a story into very small bites, very small, like I'm just going to focus on this one page here and not think about the fact that it's part of a bigger thing. That's what I've been doing with my novels as well. Just constantly focusing entirely on the current chapter and making sure that I don't have to think about what's happening before or after. I just focus on that entirely, and just write this one page at a time, and that's been working out great for me. I'm finishing my 5th novel tomorrow, hopefully. They're clapping. No, but I'm done talking now. Very thirsty. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. This was very lovely. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, now you may clap.
Thank you.
Was there anything else you wanted to add for the library?
I think it's good.
No, there's no upcoming events you want to advertise?
Please come to all of our events. Thank you.
That is so typical. What am I doing here? So, so I did think I was some flavor of introvert when I was living in North America. I move here and no, I'm the loudest in the room. Not only I'm the loudest in the room, I go see movies with my husband. I'm the only one laughing in the room. We're going to see, we go see comedies in the movie theaters, and there's a joke, I laugh. That's the thing we do in North America. I'm gonna be signing, as I mentioned now. So there's a bunch of things, including my novel, my comics. I mentioned a few already. I also have some copies of Candy Core. When the pandemic started, I was like, okay,